I returned from vacation to find my daughter's bedroom stripped bare. My sister had sold everything, custom furniture I designed to pay her debts. My mother defended the theft. They didn't realize one thing: I secretly owned my sister's home, and her lease was up. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence of the house should have been welcoming. After 10 days of chaos at a theme park resort in Orlando, 10 days of humidity, overpriced churros, and the kind of aggressive joy that only a 12-year-old can sustain for that long, I was ready for the cool, curated stillness of my own home. My daughter, Alice, was already thundering up the stairs, her suitcase abandoned in the foyer, eager to reunite with her sanctuary. She had spent the entire flight talking about how much she missed her bed, her reading nook, and the specific way the afternoon light hit her vanity. "Don't forget to bring your laundry down," I called out, locking the front door behind me. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl on the console table and leaned back against the wood paneling, closing my eyes for just a second. That was when the scream tore through the ceiling. It wasn't a scream of pain, exactly. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock, followed immediately by a sob that sounded like something heavy breaking. "Alice," I shouted, my heart hammering against my ribs instantly. I didn't wait for an answer. I took the stairs two at a time, my travel fatigue vanishing under a surge of adrenaline. Thoughts raced through my head. Had she fallen? Was there an intruder? A burst pipe? I skid into the hallway and stopped dead at the doorway to her room. Alice was standing in the center of the room, her hands covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking violently. But it wasn't what was in the room that stopped me. It was what wasn't there. The room was gutted. The custom canopy bed I had designed and built with my own contractor, a piece made of white oak with intricate, hand-carved floral inlays, was gone. The mattress was gone. The vintage French vanity we had restored together over a summer was gone. The velvet reading chair? Gone. Even the rug was missing. The room was nothing but 4 gray walls and the indentations in the carpet where the heavy furniture used to sit. It looked like a foreclosure. It looked like a crime scene. "Mom," Alice choked out, turning to look at me, her face wet with tears. "Where is it? Where is my room?" I stepped forward, my brain struggling to process the visual information. This wasn't a burglary. Burglars took jewelry, electronics, safes. They didn't dismantle and move a 300-pound solid oak bed frame and a matching armoire. This took time. This took coordination. I walked to the closet. Empty. The clothes were piled in black garbage bags in the corner, tossed there like trash. "It's okay," I said, though my voice was trembling. I pulled Alice into my arms, pressing her head against my shoulder. She was shaking so hard I could feel it in my own teeth. "It's okay, baby, I'm here." "Did we get robbed?" She sobbed into my shirt. I looked around the empty room, my eyes scanning for clues. That's when I saw it. On the floor, near where the nightstand used to be, was a crumpled receipt from a gas station, dated 3 days ago. And next to it, a flyer. I released Alice gently and picked up the flyer. It was a printed confirmation for a U-Haul rental. The name on the rental agreement wasn't a stranger's. It was a name I knew better than my own. Carla. My sister. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, heavier and darker than any anger I had ever known. This wasn't a random crime. This was family. The betrayal hit me harder than the sight of the empty room. It wasn't just furniture. It was my daughter's safety, her privacy, her world, sold off like scrap. I looked at my daughter, who was wiping her eyes on her sleeve, looking at me with total devastation. "No, Alice," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. "We didn't get robbed. We got betrayed." The next hour was a blur of triage. I couldn't let Alice stay in that hollowed-out shell of a room. I moved her mattress from the guest room into hers, a temporary fix that felt pathetic against the magnitude of the loss, and found some of her bedding in the linen closet. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, staring at the spot where her vanity used to be. That vanity had been her pride and joy. It held her sketches, her diary, her little collection of perfumes. "Why would Aunt Carla do this?" she asked, her voice small and broken. That was the cue. Euston, that made the bile rise in my throat. Why? I walked out into the hallway and dialed Carla's number. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so potent it felt like it might snap the phone in half. She answered on the third ring, her voice breezy and deceptively casual. "Hey, Sophia, you guys back already? How was the mouse?" "Where is it?" I asked. I didn't yell. I didn't have the energy to yell. "Where is what?" She feigned ignorance, but I could hear the tightness in her tone, the subtle intake of breath. "Don't play games with me, Carla. Alice's room, the bed, the armoire, the vanity. Where is my daughter's furniture?" There was a pause and then a sigh, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Look, Soph, don't freak out. I had to make a move. I was in a jam, okay? A real tight spot. This guy, he was going to come for the car if I didn't come up with $4,000 by Friday. You guys were in Florida living it up, and I figured. You know, Alice is 12. She wants new stuff anyway, right? That baby stuff was getting old." "Baby stuff," I repeated, my voice rising. "That was custom white oak, Carla. That was $5,000 worth of furniture. And you sold it to who?" "Just some people on Marketplace," she said dismissively. "I got a good deal. Look, I'll pay you back, you know I will, once my tax return hits, or maybe when Brian gets that settlement." "You broke into my house," I cut her off. "You used the emergency key Mom gave you, you rented a truck, and you stole from your niece." "Stole is a harsh word," she snapped. "I borrowed the value. Family helps family, Sophia. You have so much. You have this big house, your business, the trips. I just needed a bridge loan. I didn't think you'd miss it for a few days." "You sold it to strangers," I screamed, finally losing my composure. "It's gone, Carla. You can't pay back a custom piece that's sitting in someone else's house right now." "Stop being dramatic," she said, her voice turning cold. "It's just wood. God, you're so materialistic. This is why nobody likes coming over there. You care more about your precious designs than your own sister not losing her car." She hung up on me. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the phone, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. I felt physically ill. The violation was absolute. She felt entitled to my property, to my daughter's happiness, simply because she had less and I had more. I barely had time to process the call before my phone rang again. It was my mother, Barbara. Carla had clearly gotten to her first. "Sophia," my mother's voice was stern, the tone she used when I was a teenager coming home past curfew. "Carla called me crying. She said you threatened to call the police." "She burglarized my home, Mom," I said, walking into my own bedroom and pacing the floor. "She emptied Alice's room." "She didn't burglarize anything," Mom said soothingly. "She has a key, and she was desperate. You know how hard she's had it since the divorce. She needed the money for the car payments so she could get to work. Would you rather your sister be unemployed?" "I would rather she ask me," I countered. "Or better yet, not steal from a child." "Alice is fine," Mom dismissed. "She's always at your place anyway. She has plenty of things. You can design her a new room in a weekend. You're so talented, Sophia. Why are you making this into a war? Carla is family. We don't call the police on family." "She sold heirlooms, Mom." "Stuff," Mom corrected. "It's just stuff. You have money. She doesn't. It's the Christian thing to do to forgive her. She promised she'd pay you back." "She never pays me back," I said, sinking onto the edge of my bed. "She owes me $600 from Christmas, $2,000 from the car repair last year." "And you never missed it," Mom said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because you're blessed. Don't let your blessings make you hard, Sophia. Let it go, for me." I ended the call without saying goodbye. I sat there in the silence of my bedroom, feeling the walls closing in. My own mother and sister had gaslit me into thinking I was the villain for being robbed. They saw me as a bottomless ATM, a resource to be harvested whenever Carla made a mistake. I walked back to Alice's room. She was asleep on the mattress on the floor, clutching a stuffed bear that had survived the purge only because it had been in the wash. Looking at her sleeping form, something inside me shifted. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. They thought they knew the extent of my blessings. They thought they knew my finances. They saw the interior design business, the nice car, the vacations. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Carla lived in a beautiful 3-bedroom townhouse on the north side of the city. She had lived there for 3 years, paying $1,200 a month, nearly 40% below the market rate for that area. She bragged about her dumb landlord who never raised the rent and fixed things immediately. She didn't know that the dumb landlord was an LLC called Oak Leaf Properties. And she certainly didn't know that Oak Leaf Properties was solely owned by me. To understand why I didn't just scream at them until my throat bled, you have to understand the history. I wasn't always the rich sister. 10 years ago, I was a single mom waiting tables, studying design at night while my ex-husband dodged child support. I scraped. I saved. I built my business brick by brick, client by client, starting with small bathroom renovations and working my way up to commercial real estate staging and investment. Carla, on the other hand, had always been the wild spirit. That was Mom's term for it. In reality, Carla was chaotic. She moved from job to job, relationship to relationship, leaving a trail of debt and drama in her wake. And every time she fell, I was there with a pillow. When she got evicted 3 years ago, I had just closed on a block of townhouses as an investment. I couldn't just give her money, she would have spent it. So, I set up a lease through my property management company. I told my manager, Mr. Henderson, to treat her like a normal tenant, but to cap the rent at what she could afford. I subsidized the rest out of my own pocket, losing about $800 a month in potential profit just to ensure my sister had a safe roof over her head. I never told her. I knew if she knew I was the landlord, she would stop paying altogether. She would abuse the maintenance line. She would treat the property like she treated my house, with total lack of respect. So, for 3 years, I had been anonymously funding her lifestyle. And this was how she repaid me. I went downstairs to my home office and booted up my computer. I didn't start working on a design for a client. I opened the file marked Real Estate Assets. I pulled up the folder for 1847 Oak Street. I looked at the ledger. Carla was technically late on this month's rent, as usual. Mr. Henderson usually sent a gentle reminder on the 10th. Today was the 14th. I sat back in my chair and thought about Carla. The antagonist in my life wasn't some mustache-twirling villain. She was a woman who wore yoga pants and posted inspirational quotes on Facebook while stealing from her niece. Carla was 36, 2 years younger than me, but she acted 16. She worked part-time as a receptionist at a salon, a job she constantly complained about. She drove a leased SUV she couldn't afford. She had a boyfriend, Rick, who was a promoter, which I gathered meant he was unemployed. The last time I saw them, at Thanksgiving, Rick had walked around my house picking up vases and checking the brand stamps on the bottom. "You sitting on a gold mine here, Soph," he'd said, winking. I hadn't liked it then. Now it made my skin crawl. Had they planned this then? I thought about the conversation with my mother. "You have so much. She has nothing." That narrative was the poison. My mother, Barbara, had created a monster by shielding Carla from every consequence of her actions. If Carla got a speeding ticket, Mom paid it. If Carla lost a job, Mom blamed the boss. And now that Carla had committed grand larceny, Mom was blaming the victim. If I did nothing, if I let it go, as Mom suggested, Carla would learn nothing. In fact, she would learn that she could rob me and get away with it. She would do it again. Next time it would be my jewelry or my identity. I looked at the lease agreement on my screen. Standard California Residential Lease. Clause 14, Prohibited Acts. Clause 22, Default. I picked up my phone. It was late, past 9 p.m., but I knew Mr. Henderson would answer. He was an old-school property manager, the kind who wore suits to inspect a leaking faucet and took his fiduciary duties seriously. "Mr. Henderson," I said when he answered. "Ms. Sophia," he replied, his voice raspy but alert. "Everything all right, it's late." "I need you to handle a situation at the Oak Street property," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the emotion that was ravaging my insides. "Unit 4, the problem tenant." He knew Carla was difficult, though he didn't know she was my sister. I had kept that firewall strictly in place. "Yes, Unit 4. The tenant is in arrears, correct." 5 days late. I was going to post a notice on Monday. "Post it tomorrow morning," I said. "And Mr. Henderson, I want you to initiate a termination of tenancy. She's on a month-to-month now, isn't she?" "She is. We can give her 30 days. No cause needed, technically, but with the late rent." "Give her the 30-day notice to vacate," I commanded. "And I want a full inspection of the property scheduled for 48 hours from now. I want to know if she's sold the appliances." There was a pause on the line. Mr. Henderson had worked for me for 5 years. He knew I was usually lenient. "You want her out, for real this time." I looked up at the ceiling, thinking of Alice Lee. Ping on a mattress on the floor in an empty room. "Yes, Mr. Henderson, I want her out. And I want you to raise the listing price to market value immediately after." "Understood. I'll have the sheriff serve the papers if she doesn't comply." "She won't comply," I said softly, "but that's not my problem anymore." I hung up the phone. My hands were no longer shaking. The sister who forgave everything was gone. The landlord was here. The morning after the discovery, the house felt different. It wasn't just the empty room upstairs. It was the silence of a sanctuary that had been breached. I woke up with a headache that pulsed behind my eyes, a physical manifestation of the betrayal I was still trying to digest. The first thing I did was call a locksmith. I stood in the kitchen, watching the coffee brew, listening to the heavy, mechanical thud click of the deadbolt being replaced on the front door. The locksmith, a burly man named Dave who had worked on my rental properties before, looked at me with sympathetic eyes. "You want the back slider done too, Miss Sophia?" he asked, wiping grease from his hands on a rag. "Yes," I said, my voice flat. "And the garage keypad code, change it all. I want this house to be a fortress." "Someone lose a key." "Something like that," I murmured. As Dave worked, I went into my office and locked the door. It was time to stop being the sister and start being the strategist. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I pulled up the tenant file for Carla again. I had always kept a polite distance from the management of 1847 Oak Street to maintain the illusion that I was just a helpful sister who knew a guy who could get her a cheap lease. I let Mr. Henderson handle the day-to-day. But now, I needed to see the raw data. I logged into the property management portal and pulled the maintenance logs and communication history. What I found made my stomach turn. There were 5 noise complaints in the last 6 months. Neighbors had reported loud music, shouting matches at 2 a.m., and most damning of all, unauthorized occupants. The lease explicitly stated, single occupancy plus 1 minor dependent. It was meant for Carla and her son, Leo, who stayed with her on weekends. But the notes from Mr. Henderson's assistant were clear. Tenant appears to have a permanent adult male resident. Vehicle, black Dodge Charger, parked in spot 2 consistently overnight. Neighbor in 4B reports additional dog barking. Rick. Carla had moved her unemployed boyfriend in. She had brought a dog into a pet-free unit, and she hadn't paid rent in 5 days. I felt a cold burn of realization. She wasn't just struggling, she was exploiting my friend's kindness. She was living in a subsidized bubble, breaking every rule and saving nothing. Then I looked at her social media. I hadn't followed Carla closely in months. Her posts were usually a frustrating mix of vague booking about fake people and photos of her drinking margaritas. I scrolled back 3 days, to the day she rented the U-Haul. There was no post about paying bills. There was no post about saving the car. But there was a post from Rick's Instagram, which was public. A photo of a brand new, 65-inch 4K OLED TV, still in the box, sitting in the back of a U-Haul. Caption, big upgrades for the man cave. Finally got the setup I deserve, blessed grind gaming. I zoomed in on the photo. In the corner of the truck bed, barely visible behind the massive TV box, was a flash of white wood. A curved piece of timber with a hand-carved flower. My daughter's bed frame. She hadn't sold the furniture to save her car. She had sold my daughter's sanctuary to buy her boyfriend a television. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. This wasn't desperation. This was malice. This was a choice to prioritize her boyfriend's entertainment over my daughter's comfort. My phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson. "The notice has been posted on the door, Miss Sophia," he said. 30-day notice to vacate for lease violation and non-payment. I also scheduled the inspection for tomorrow at 10 a.m. "Did she see you?" I asked. "She came to the door," he said, his voice hesitant. "She used some colorful language. She said she was going to call the owner. She said she knows people." "Let her call," I said, staring at the photo of the TV on my screen. "I'll be there for the inspection tomorrow, Mr. Henderson." "Are you sure? Usually owners don't." "I'll be there," I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I need to see the state of my investment." The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I dressed not as a sister, but as a businesswoman. I wore a structured blazer, dark jeans, and boots. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I needed the armor. I met Mr. Henderson outside the townhouse complex at 9:55 a.m. He looked nervous, clutching his clipboard like a shield. He's been calling the office nonstop since yesterday, he warned me as we walked toward Unit 4. She's claiming the eviction is illegal. She says she has a verbal agreement with the owner's friend. "She doesn't have an agreement with anyone," I said, checking my watch. "Let's go." Unit 4 looked tired. The flower beds I had paid to have landscaped 3 years ago were overgrown with weeds. There was a rusting bicycle chained to the front railing, violating the HOA rules. The blinds in the living room window were bent and broken, looking like jagged teeth. Mr. Henderson knocked firmly. "Property management, inspection." There was a muffled shout from inside, the sound of a dog barking aggressively, and then the door was wrenched open. Carla stood there. She was wearing a stained, oversized t-shirt and pajama pants. Her hair was messy, and she looked like she hadn't slept. When she saw Mr. Henderson, her face twisted into a sneer. "You can't just come here," she shouted, ignoring the 24-hour notice we had legally provided. "I told you I'm calling my sister. She knows the owner. You guys are going to be in so much trouble when—" Then her eyes slid past Mr. Henderson's shoulder and locked onto me. The sneer froze. Her mouth hung open for a second, her brain trying to recalibrate the context. Why was Sophia here? To save her? To yell at the mean property manager? "Soph," she breathed, a flicker of relief washing over her face. "Oh, thank God. You're here. Tell this idiot to get off my porch. He posted an eviction notice. Can you believe that? Call your friend, the owner. Tell him to back off." I didn't smile. I didn't step forward to hug her. I stood on the concrete walkway, perfectly still. "I don't need to call anyone, Carla," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried across the small yard. "What? Just call him. Tell him I'm good for the rent next week." "There is no him, Carla," I said, stepping up onto the porch. Mr. Henderson stepped aside, allowing me to take the lead. "There is no mysterious landlord friend. There never was." Carla blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I own this unit," I said. The words hung in the humid air between us. "I bought this building 4 years ago. Oak Leaf Properties is my company. I have been your landlord for 3 years." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the realization crawl over her features. First confusion, then shock, and finally, a deep, red flush of humiliation and rage. "You," she whispered, "you've been collecting my rent, you've been profiting off me." "Profiting?" I let out a short, sharp laugh. "Carla, the market rate for this unit is $2,200. You pay $1,200. I have been losing $1,000 a month for 3 years to give you a place to live. I have been subsidizing your life." "You liar," she shrieked, stepping back as if I had slapped her. "You lied to me, you pretended it was some guy." "Because I knew if you knew it was me, you wouldn't pay," I said, my voice hardening. "And I was right, you're 5 days late, again, but that's not why I'm here." I pushed past her, walking into the living room. The smell hit me instantly. Stale smoke, wet dog, and something rotting. The carpet, a neutral beige I had selected for its durability, was stained with dark, greasy patches. And there, mounted on the wall with exposed wires trailing down like guts, was the 65-inch TV. "You can't come in here," Carla screamed, chasing after me. "I gave 24-hour notice," I said, scanning the room. "And as the owner, I have the right to inspect the property for damages." Rick was on the couch, shirtless, controller in hand. He jumped up when he saw me, looking from Carla to me. "Yo, what the hell?" "Get out," I said to him. I didn't even look him in the eye. "Excuse me," Rick puffed his chest out. "You are an unauthorized tenant," I stated, reciting the lease clause from memory. "You are not on the lease. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, or I will have the sheriff remove you for trespassing. This is your warning." I turned back to Carla, who was shaking with rage. "You sold my daughter's furniture," I said, pointing to the massive TV. "To buy that." Carla's eyes darted to the TV, then back to me. "I needed the money, I have bills." "You have a boyfriend who doesn't work and a gambling problem you think I don't know about," I countered, bluffing slightly, but the look on her face told me I had hit a nerve. "I saw the receipt, Carla. I saw the post. You stripped Alice's room to buy toys for Rick." "It's just furniture," she screamed, throwing her hands up. "Why are you so obsessed with things? You have everything. You own this whole building. You're rich. You're sitting on piles of money and you're evicting your own sister over a stupid bed." "I'm evicting you because you are a thief," I said, stepping closer to her. "And because you destroyed the one boundary I asked you to respect, my daughter's happen. You stole from a child, Carla. And now you're going to face the consequences like an adult." "You can't do this," she hissed, tears of anger streaming down her face. "Mom won't let you." "Mom isn't on the deed," I said coldly. "I am. You have 30 days. If you aren't out by the 14th of next month, the sheriff will put you out." The fallout was immediate and nuclear. By the time I got back to my car, my phone had 18 missed calls from my mother. I didn't answer. I drove straight to my office, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I needed to document everything. I sat at my desk and uploaded the photos I had taken during the inspection. The stained carpets, the holes in the drywall from the mounted TV, the evidence of the dog, scratched door frames, urine stains in the corner. My estimate for repairs was already pushing $5,000. That was more than her security deposit. When I finally answered my mother's call an hour later, she didn't say hello. "You represent the devil," she spat. "Hello, Mom," I said, putting the phone on speaker and continuing to type up the inspection report. "Carla just called me. She is hysterical. She said you own the house. Is that true? Have you been lying to us for 3 years?" "I didn't lie," I said. "I omitted the truth to protect my investment and to help her, and look what happened." "You are evicting her," Mom screamed. "She has nowhere to go, Sophia. She has a child. What about Leo? Are you going to throw your nephew on the street?" "Leo lives with his father during the week," I reminded her. "And Carla can move in with you. You have a guest room." There was a sudden silence on the line. My mother loved Carla, but she loved her quiet, tidy life more. She didn't want Carla and Rick and the chaos living in her two-bedroom condo. That's not the point, Mom stammered. The point is that you are rich enough to absorb this. Why are you being so cruel? Over furniture, we can replace furniture. It's not about the furniture anymore, Mom, I said, my voice rising. I just did an inspection. She has trashed the unit. There is thousands of dollars in damage. She moved Rick in against the lease. She has a dog against the lease. And she sold Alice's belongings to buy a television. She needed the money for food, Mom cried. She told me she was starving. I have the photo, Mom, I said, clicking the mouse to send the file. Check your email. I just sent it to you. Rick's Instagram. New TV for the man cave. Posted the same day she rented the U-Haul. I heard the ping of her notification in the background. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. Well, Mom said finally, her voice weaker but still defiant. Maybe Rick bought it, you don't know. With what money? I asked. He doesn't work. Carla paid for it, with the money she got from fencing my daughter's bed. You're being petty, Mom insisted, pivoting again. You're punishing her because you're jealous. Jealous, I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. Of what? Her unemployment, her thief boyfriend, her eviction. Jealous that she knows how to enjoy life, Mom said cruelly. You're so cold, Sophia, always working, always counting pennies. Carla is warm, she makes mistakes, but she has a heart. You have a calculator where your heart should be. That broke something in me. For years, I had paid their bills, fixed their messes, and cushioned their falls, all while being told I was the cold one because I had the audacity to be successful. If I'm so cold, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed emotion, then you won't mind if I stop paying for her cell phone plan and her car insurance, which I've been doing for 5 years. You wouldn't, Mom gasped. Watch me, I said. And Mom, if you continue to harass me about this eviction, I'm going to block your number. Carla has 30 days. If she damages the property further, I will sue her for the difference. And I will win. I will never forgive you for this, Mom threatened. If you kick her out, don't expect to see us at Christmas. If she's not out, I countered, there won't be a Christmas. I hung up. The war had escalated. They were digging in, relying on emotional blackmail to force me to fold. But they had underestimated the amount of evidence I was gathering. I spent the next 2 weeks building the case. I hired a private investigator to look into Rick, just to be sure. The report came back 3 days later. Rick wasn't just unemployed. He had a record, petty theft, fraud, and, crucially, he was currently being sued by a previous landlord for stripping copper wire from a rental unit. This was the man living in my property. I printed the report. I printed the photos of the damage. I printed the text messages where Carla admitted to selling the furniture. Carla thought this was a family squabble. She thought if she cried enough, I would cave. She didn't realize I was preparing for a legal dismantling of her entire narrative. But the final straw came a week before the deadline. I received a notification from the neighborhood watch app for the area where the townhouse was located. Alert, police activity at 1847 Oak Street. Domestic disturbance. 2 a.m. I drove over the next morning. The front window, the one with the broken blinds, was now smashed. There was plywood nailed over it. I didn't call Carla. I called Mr. Henderson. File the unlawful detainer the second the 30 days are up, I ordered. And get a restraining order against Rick for the property. I want him banned from the premises immediately. Ms. Sophia, Mr. Henderson said, his voice grave. The neighbors are petitioning the HOA to take action against the owner, against you. They're saying the property is a nuisance. Let them, I said, staring at the plywood on the window of the house I had worked so hard to buy. It helps my case. It proves she is destroying the neighborhood. I looked at the shattered window and realized something. I wasn't just evicting a tenant, I was exorcising a ghost. The ghost of the sister I wished I had. I got back in my car, I had one more stop to make. I was going to find the people who bought Alice's furniture. I had the U-Haul receipt and I had a hunch. Carla was lazy. She wouldn't have driven far. I opened Facebook Marketplace and set the search radius to 5 miles from my house. I typed in custom oak bed. And there it was, sold. But the seller profile wasn't Carla's, it was Rick's. I clicked on the buyer's profile. A woman named Mrs. Higgins. She looked kind, a grandmother type. I sent her a message. Dear Mrs. Higgins, I believe you recently purchased a bed frame from a man named Rick. I am the designer and original owner of that bed. It was stolen from my home. I am not asking for it back for free, but I need to speak with you. I waited. If I could get the bed back, I could heal Alice's heart. But as for Carla, her time was up. 2 days before the eviction deadline, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her tone was surprisingly calm, almost cheerful, which set off every alarm bell in my head. Sophia, she said, come over for dinner tonight, just a family meal. Carla wants to apologize. She wants to make things right before Tuesday. I hesitated. I knew this was a trap, an ambush designed to guilt me into rescinding the eviction notice. But I also knew I needed to end this. I needed to look them in the eye and deliver the final verdict, not through a property manager or a text message, but face to face. I'll be there at 6, I said. But Mom, if Rick is there, I'm leaving. He won't be, she promised too quickly. Just us girls. I spent the afternoon preparing. I wasn't bringing a casserole, I was bringing a file folder. Earlier that morning, I had met with Mrs. Higgins. She was a lovely, retired schoolteacher who lived in a bungalow 3 towns over. When I arrived with the U-Haul, this time rented by me, and showed her the police report I had filed regarding the theft, she was horrified. He told me his daughter was moving to college and didn't want the old-fashioned stuff anymore, Mrs. Higgins said, her hand over her mouth. He seemed so insistent. He stole it, I said gently, from my 12-year-old. I didn't just take the furniture. I paid Mrs. Higgins the $400 she had paid Rick, plus another $100 for her trouble. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about cleaning the stain off the memory. As my movers loaded the bed frame back into the truck, I felt the first true breath of relief I'd had in weeks. The physical pieces of my daughter's sanctuary were coming home. But the emotional debt was still unpaid. I arrived at my mother's house at 6:00 p.m. sharp. The driveway was empty, which gave me a moment of hope that maybe, just maybe, they were serious about the apology. I walked in. The smell of pot roast, my favorite childhood meal, filled the air. It was a calculated nostalgic trigger. Mom met me in the hallway, wiping her hands on an apron. Sophia, you look tired, honey. Come in, come in. I walked into the living room. Carla was sitting on the sofa, looking small and tragical. She was wearing a modest dress I hadn't seen in years, her hair brushed, no makeup. It was the innocent little sister costume. But sitting next to her, manspreading across my mother's floral love seat, was Rick. I stopped dead. I said if he was here, I was leaving. Now, Sophia, Mom rushed to intervene, blocking the doorway. Rick is part of this. He lives there too. He wanted to apologize as well. Rick smirked. It was a subtle, greasy expression that didn't reach his eyes. Hey, Soph, long time. I didn't sit. I stood by the fireplace, clutching my bag. You have 5 minutes. What is this? Carla stood up, wringing her hands. Sophia, please, I'm sorry about the furniture, okay? I messed up, I was desperate. But you can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go. Leo has school. I can't move back to the city, it's dangerous. You should have thought about that before you violated the lease, I said. It's just a lease, Rick interjected, leaning forward. Family is thicker than paper, right? You got plenty of units. You can write this one off. Tax deduction, baby. The arrogance in his voice was like a physical blow. It's not a tax deduction, Rick, I said, my voice icy. It's a loss, a financial hemorrhage. We can pay you back, Carla pleaded. Just give us 6 months. I'll get a second job. Rick is starting a new venture. A new venture? I asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file. Like stripping copper wire from your last apartment. The room went silent. Rick's smirk vanished. He sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. Where did you get that? He hissed. Public records, I said, tossing the pie report onto the coffee table. You have a warrant for unpaid restitution in 3 counties, Rick, and you're currently trespassing in my property. Mom, Carla shrieked, looking at Barbara. She's stalking us. I am investigating the people destroying my investment, I countered. I turned to my mother. You want to know why I'm so cold? You want to know why I'm evicting them? I pulled out the photos of the townhouse. The smashed window, the stained carpets, the hole in the wall behind the TV. Look at them, I commanded, spreading the glossy 8x10s across the pot roast spread on the dining table. Look at what your warm daughter did to my property. Mom looked down. She picked up a photo of the kitchen, where grease coated the cabinets and trash was piled in the corner. Her hand trembled. This can be cleaned, Mom whispered weakly. And this, I pulled out the final piece of evidence. The printout of the Facebook Marketplace conversation between Rick and Mrs. Higgins. You didn't sell the furniture to save your car, Carla, I said, my voice trembling with the sheer weight of the truth. You sold it to buy a TV, a 65-inch OLED, for him. Carla's face went white. She looked at Rick, then back at me. No, Rick said he paid for the TV with his winnings. He has no winnings, Carla, I shouted, finally losing my composure. He's a leech. He stole my daughter's bed, sold it to a grandmother for pennies, and bought a toy, and you let him. I didn't know, Carla sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He told me he handled it. You drove the U-Haul, I screamed back. Don't lie to me, I saw the rental agreement. Rick stood up then, his face flushing red. You think you're so smart, huh? Rich bitch thinking she can push people around. You can't evict us. We have tenant rights. Squatter rights. It takes months to get a sheriff out there. I ain't going nowhere. I looked him dead in the eye. I had been waiting for this moment. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I anticipated you might say that. That's why I filed a police report for grand larceny this morning, regarding the furniture. Rick froze. Mrs. Higgins is very cooperative, I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She identified you, Rick. She has the messages. The value of the stolen goods exceeds $950. That's a felony in California. Rick looked at the door, he looked at Carla, then he looked at me. You wouldn't, he muttered. The police are already on their way to the townhouse to serve the warrant, I lied, or rather, exaggerated. I had filed the report, but the warrant was pending. But Rick didn't know that. If you go back there, you go to jail. If you stay here, I looked at my mother. Mom, are you harboring a fugitive? My mother looked from the photos of the destroyed house to the man who had ruined her daughter's life. For the first time in years, the fog of denial lifted. Get out, Mom whispered. What? Rick barked. Get out of my house, Mom said, her voice shaking but firm. She looked at Carla. And you lied to me. You said it was for the car. Mom, please, Carla wailed. Get out, Mom screamed, throwing the photo of the trashed kitchen at Rick. Rick didn't wait. He grabbed his jacket and bolted for the door. The sound of his car peeling out of the driveway seconds later was the only closure I needed regarding him. Carla sat on the sofa, sobbing alone. The innocent sister mask was gone. She was just a woman who had made terrible choices and run out of people to blame. The eviction stands, I said to her, picking up my bag. You have 48 hours. If the unit isn't empty and keys on the counter by Tuesday at noon, the sheriff will physically remove you. And Carla, I'm suing you for the damages. Where will I go? She whispered. I don't know, I said. But for the first time in your life, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. Tuesday came with a gray, relentless drizzle. I sat in my car across the street from 1847 Oak Street, watching the clock on my dashboard tick toward 12:00 p.m. Mr. Henderson stood on the porch, checking his watch. Next to him stood two sheriff's deputies. I had requested the standby, paying extra for the peace of mind. At 11:58, the door opened. Carla walked out. She was carrying two laundry baskets filled with clothes and a box of kitchen supplies. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were puffy, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She didn't have Rick to help her. She didn't have Mom. She walked to her car, the SUV she was struggling to pay for, and shoved the baskets into the backseat. It was packed to the roof. She stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked across the street. She saw my car. She knew I was watching. For a moment, I thought she might come over. Might scream, might beg, might throw a rock, but she just stared. There was no defiance left in her posture, just the slump of defeat. She got in her car and drove away. I waited until her taillights disappeared around the corner before I got out. "All clear," I asked Mr. Henderson as I walked up the driveway. "She left the keys," he said, handing me the ring. "But, well, you better brace yourself." We walked inside. The smell was worse than before. The air was thick with the scent of neglect. The man cave TV was gone, of course, taking a chunk of drywall with it. The carpets were ruined beyond saving. The kitchen counters had burn marks. But as I walked through the wreckage of what was once a beautiful investment, I didn't feel angry. I felt cleansed. "Get the contractor in here tomorrow," I told Mr. Henderson. "Rip it all out. New floors, new paint, new appliances. I want it listed at market rate by the 1st of the month." "You got it, Miss Sophia." "And Mr. Henderson," I added, looking at the spot where the TV had been. "Strict credit checks, no family." He smiled, a genuine crinkly-eyed smile. Understood. I drove home. The house was quiet when I entered, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was peaceful. I walked upstairs to Alice's room. It wasn't empty anymore. The white oak bed was back in its place, polished and gleaming. I had spent the entire previous day reassembling it, tightening every bolt with a ferocity that felt like prayer. The vanity was back. The rug was back. I had bought new bedding, crisp, white linens, and a duvet with a pattern of wildflowers, to signify a fresh start. Alice was sitting on the bed, reading a book. When she saw me, she looked up and smiled. It was a tentative smile, but it was real. "It smells like lemons," she said. "I polished the wood," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "to get the bad memories out." "Is she gone?" Alice asked. She didn't say her name. "Yes," I said. "She's gone. She won't be coming back here." Alice nodded. She put her book down and walked over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Thank you for getting my room back, Mom. I know it was hard." "I move mountains for you, baby," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Or at least, move a lot of heavy furniture." The next few months were a slow reconstruction of our lives. Mom and I were low contact. She called occasionally, her voice subdued. She told me Carla was staying with a friend from high school, working double shifts at the salon. Rick was gone, arrested 2 weeks later on an unrelated warrant. Mom tried once to bring up the lawsuit I had filed against Carla for the $6,000 in damages. "She can't pay it, Sophia," Mom had said. "Then she can have her wages garnished," I replied calmly. "It's not about the money, Mom, it's about the lesson. Actions have consequences." Mom hadn't argued. I think, deep down, she finally understood that her help had been hurting us all along. One evening, I was sitting on my patio, drinking a glass of wine and looking at the listing for 1847 Oak Street. It had rented in 3 days at full market price to a young professional couple with excellent credit. My phone buzzed, a text from Carla. "I'm sorry for everything. I know you hate me, but I'm sorry." I looked at the message for a long time. I didn't hate her. Hate requires energy, and I had spent all my energy protecting my daughter. I felt indifference. I felt the distance of a bridge that had been burned and couldn't be rebuilt. I didn't reply. I put the phone down, took a sip of wine, and watched the sun set over the trees. My daughter was safe. My home was secure. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight.